In this recording, we'll be looking at how to pick faults. We will start, you will presumably have gone through and sort of looked at the data, reconnaissance through the inlines, the cross lines, and the timelines, or time surfaces. So I happen to have picked out a fault that looks pretty clear in cross line 120. So I'm going to try to move in my 3D viewer here, or 3D window. I'm going to try to go to the point where we can see that. So I'm going to turn the inline off, and I'm going to, for the moment, I'm going to leave the time slice. But I'm now set at cross line 94. So one way I can go directly to cross line 120 is to select it and go up, and you see 94 here corresponding to the current cross line. And I can put 120 in and press enter, and now I will be at a position on cross line 120. I can then move this image around. I can rotate it and sort of put it perpendicular to where I'm going. I'm going to go ahead and toggle off the time slice so that I have this. I can use the wheel, the middle wheel on the button. If I push that down, I can actually translate this without rotating it in 3D space. And then if I don't push on the wheel but use the wheel, I can sort of zoom in on what we're doing. Now, there are a couple of places where there are probably faults along this line. If I look along, there's something down there at that end. But the one that I'm going to look for is the one right here. This is the one I'm particularly interested in at the moment. I'm going to zoom in on this feature. And we have a fault with offsets here, here, and here coming up. Doesn't look really much like it affects the surfaces up here. But we certainly have a fault that's coming through here. And that's what I'm going to look at interpreting right now. So I like to do picking of faults. I could do it here in the 3D window, but because it's always sometimes at a funny angle, I actually prefer to do this in the interpretation window. So I'm going to go up to Window, pull it down, and I'm going to go New Interpretation Window. And then I'm going to make this so that I can look at both of these at the same time. So I'm going to right-click on Interpretation Window, and I'm going to create what's called a new vertical tab group. It means it's going to divide these two tabs into one display. So the interpretation window is over here, and the 3D window is located over here. So I'm going to put this feature that I'm after right in the middle. And then on the interpretation window, I'm going to select it with my left button so that it turns orange and active. Now notice I can now control what parts of the seismic data will be available there. And in this case, I also want the cross line. So I now have a cross line. I'm going to take the hand icon that you see here, and I'm going to press left just to activate this. And then I'm going to be able to move this and zoom in. And the yellow box here corresponds to the area that's visible in my interpretation, or in the bigger picture. So now I've surrounded this. Note that I've got it backwards. In other words, in this case, in the 3D window, I was looking at it from the opposite side. I could spin it around, but I don't think it'll be too much of a problem at this point. So the fault that we're looking for with my mouse runs right down here, and it corresponds to what we see here. I'm going to make myself just a little more space in the interpretation window for what I'm going to do. Now, at this point, I'm going to start to do interpretation. And when I do interpretation, I need to come down here into the processes pane, and I need to click on geophysics. It gives me many opportunities, and I want to do seismic interpretation. These little settings here control the kinds of icons and tasks that can be performed. So when we press seismic interpretation, we will get the various tools and icons that are relevant to what we want to do, which is to pick horizons. So what we have here is we're somewhere in the middle of this particular fault. You'll note that we've got some icons on the stage. They're on the side, on the right-hand side. They're ridiculously small and hard to read, at least for me, because I'm old. But you'll notice there's a globe with an F on it here, and that's going to be interpreting faults. You can also get that by keying the F key on the keyboard, which is what I'm not used to yet, but most people will quickly become used to it. But now I need to find or create a folder for my fault interpretations. So I'm going to come up here to interpretation folder, and picking a fault is an interpretation. So I'm going to use my right-hand key to give me some options and insert fault, and that's going to insert a folder which will have data on a particular fault. I'll select that, and I now have one called Fault Interpretation 1. I'm going to turn it on, although it won't show anything yet until I pick something, but that way it'll keep showing it in the interpretation window when I pick the fault. Okay, I'm going to come over, and I think I'm going to make this just a little bigger so that I can see what I'm doing, because I want to pick from right down here up through there. Now, the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to pick Interpret Faults. It will now remain orange, and that's now, you'll notice it gives me a cursor. Hard to see where to put this. The cursor is a little plus sign with a hole in the middle, sort of a bullseye kind of thing. And what we're going to do is we're going to click once to create a point along the fault. We will then create a sequence of them with a single button push. And then when we're finished and are at the last one, we will do a double click, which will close off that particular fault pick in this area. Now, as I look at this, I'm clearly going to have a fault right about here, so I'm going to start. You'll notice it creates a rubber band line from there. I'm going to put this fault sort of right in the middle of this horizon coming across. I'm going to come down, and I'm going to come right down to where the two blue lines here come together and put in a pick. Now, not sure what I want to do down here and exactly what I have, so for the moment I kind of like this point because I've got a termination here and I've got terminations here. I don't quite know what to do with this, whether there's a feature that it's kind of going around. But for the moment, I'm going to go ahead and pick this as my last point on the downward side, so I'm going to double click on it. Okay, now I can move my cursor away, and I have one fault pick on this particular seismic section. Now, there are some things I can do to make corrections if I want to on this. For example, I might want to just move one of these points a little bit, and the tool I can use to do that is this tool, which is an arrow with sort of 3 points. It's called Select and Edit Add Points. So I'm going to click that, and now I'm going to come down and I can grab a point and I can move it in some way that I want to. Okay? In this case, I kind of like where it was, so I'm going to let go, move away. And now if I wanted to delete that, I probably could with the delete key, but generally if I've moved it, I want to keep it there. Now, I can also go, and with that same setting, I can, for example, let's say I want to extend this endpoint. Well, I can pick sort of an arbitrary point here. It's not even on one of the previous picks, but I can hold the left button down, and notice it can move one way or the other, but it can also go and it will connect to that and allow you to extend a point. So let's say that I wanted to go up to about here because I do have something going on here, although above that it really doesn't seem like there's probably much of any fault. So I'm going to let go there. And now I have extended this. So I can do that top or bottom. I can insert new points in here and move them around at will. I can also do what's called erasing a point. This is called the eraser. You can actually resize it, but I'm going to click on it. And now if I were to come and were to say, well, I really don't want that point, note that I have this little square area, so I can simply click on that, and that point has now disappeared. It doesn't really hurt me here because the fault seems to go right through where I had it, so it was probably a redundant point anyway.